purpose of a law is to prevent the repetition of an infraction. So when we put laws forward in order to prevent someone that already follows the law not to violate the law, it's kind of counterproductive. What Pierre Poilievre puts in is that when we have too much regulation, it prevents the people that are actually trying to abide by the law to actually properly follow it, and it penalizes them. The purpose of putting a law into place is to make sure to protect the people and to answer a need. So these laws were not effective. They've been deemed not effective by many chief of police. And at the end, we're paying for these programs where that money could be invested to some more urgent matter, like we're talking about the border today. There are many urgent matters, but the border is one of them. And reinvesting this money into preventing the weapons from entering Canada, or even better, when we catch them, to prosecute the people in a timely manner, that would be responding more to a need that the population have.
Alexandre Lavoie for Rebel News, and I'm currently at the infamous Roxham Road because today we have an exclusive interview with one of the Conservative candidates. David De Repentigny is candidate for the riding of Châteauguay and les Jardins-de-Napierville. His opponent is Nathalie Provost, the survivor of the Polytechnic shooting, and she is also a radical anti-gun activist for the organization called Poly se souvient. And I'm showing you some of the excerpt of what she said.
The issue with gun is not with criminal guns. It's with legal gun owners that have issues, and we must protect our families.
Today I'm speaking with David De Repentigny. He is a border service officer, and we will speak about, first of all, the border, but also about the upcoming election. So, David, first of all, I want you to introduce yourself, to tell a little bit people about your background and why did you choose to run for the Conservative Party.
All right, so thank you. I come from a very modest family, actually a poor family, and I was a young dropout at school. I finished my secondary by implicating myself in the community, starting a business that was hiring dropout like me to animate sports activities in the elementary school. So very young, what kept me out of trouble was actually my social implication, and that followed me all my life. I've done a short military service. I have done countless type of different work, such as working in a warehouse or as a locksmith for many years in Montreal in security, and I ended up with the Canada Border Service Agency in 2006, so about 18 years ago, and I've been working at Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle for the last 18 years. Also, I moved in Naperville like 15 years ago with my wife. I have 2 kids. I've been also a firefighter in Naperville for the last 15 years almost. So I don't know, I didn't have enough of 2 jobs. I just decided to run this year. Seriously, I think that we need to bring back politics to what's important. It means people, make it more accessible, letting people having their voice and having someone that actually works with pragmatic solution and listen to the actor of the area of whatever problems we're dealing with, and to make those ideas being form into a response that address a need, not an ideology.
So your opponent is Nathalie Provost. She said some really radical things about the legal gun owner. She said that the problem is not with illegal guns, but with the legal gun owner. And I want you to speak about it because your writing is touching the border where the illegal guns are being trafficked.
Yes. Well, first thing I want to say is to acknowledge that Madame Provost, what she experienced at the Polytechnic, it's a tragedy. No matter how much time it's going to elapse, there's nothing that can describe truly in word what happened to her. I know that she's well-intended and she believes in what she's doing. Where I disagree with Madame Provost is on the approach, meaning that when we want to ensure public safety, it's based on risk management. And I think that right now what we're doing is that we're putting more restriction on people that already follow the laws instead of focusing on the criminals that are actually violating the laws. There were many chief of police that came out in the news stating that this approach, those new restrictions and everything will not address the criminality. And as we've seen, there's been a rise in gun crime, and that even the chief of police of Toronto stated that 96% of the illegal firearms comes from the United States, and the remaining also come from the United States mostly. Is just that we can't prove it. So the way I see it is that the purpose of a law is to basically discourage someone to repeat an offense. So when we put a restriction or a penalty, is to prevent the person that already broke the law so don't do it again. By depriving people that were already following the laws, we're kind of sending the wrong message. I think that we need to focus on people that are actually violating the law, committing the crimes, and we need to put our focus on this. This program will cost at the minimum 800 million or 700 something, and it's already like they're talking about the billions and such. And what we need to understand is that in prioritizing our approach on public safety, maybe that money could have been invested somewhere else, like in prosecuting the criminals, or even in mental health, because there are some people that are committing crimes or because they're suffering from mental health, or maybe in preventive program, or we can even relieve victims from such crimes. But I think that money could have been invested in the more practical approach and stop penalizing people that are already following the law and focusing on people that actually violates it.
Mm-hmm. And the Liberals, one of the law that they put in place is C5, and we know that the Conservatives want to repeal that law. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying, is that the purpose of a law is to prevent the repetition of an infraction. So when we put laws forward in order to prevent someone that already follows the law not to violate the law, it's kind of counterproductive. What Pierre Poilievre puts in is that when we have too much regulation, it prevents the people that are actually trying to abide by the law to actually properly follow it, and it penalizes them. The purpose of putting a law into place is to make sure to protect the people and to answer a need. So these laws were not effective. They've been deemed not effective by many chief of police. And at the end, we're paying for these programs where that money could be invested to some more urgent matter, like we're talking about the border today. There are many urgent matters, but the border is one of them. And reinvesting this money into preventing the weapons from entering Canada, or even better, when we catch them, to prosecute the people in a timely manner, that would be responding more to a need that the population have than speculating on banning 22 rifle caliber that are not military weapon.
Mm-hmm. And so you worked at the border during the crisis that we saw in 2017 and more until now, today. What you can tell us about what happened during the Roxham Road time? What was your challenge as a border service officer and for the RCMP as well?
Well, what happened is that we already have laws into place, and this crisis could have been managed very more efficiently. At least it's the opinion of many border officers, and I won't be pretending I speak to all of them, but I know from the discussion that we're running in different offices, a lot of us feel that way. What happened is that, like I mentioned, the law is always there to respond to a need. And one of the purposes of the Immigration Act is to protect our economy and to protect our culture. This is written into the Immigration Act itself. When the people, they move through the border here, we had tools in order to deal with them in a more timely manner, meaning that if the minister had declared an irregular immigration movement, which is under Section 55, we could have detained them, and that order from the minister is given when we cannot, or it's most likely that we will not be able to proceed with the request in a timely manner, which was the case. We used to have like 3 months, 6 months to deal with a case of someone that claims asylum in Canada, and now we're like up to 3 years, 4 years, and some cases don't even make to the immigration section, because in between people are able to change their status, and then they regulate their status in Canada. But in the end, the offense they committed entering in Canada was never evaluated if the reason why they did it was sufficient enough. So we don't know if they're real refugee or not, because we never went to study their case. It's not all of them, but I had some of those cases that ended up in my hand while they were requesting a Nexus card, so I know for a fact that they exist. Also, what we need to understand is that by doing so, we would have been able to return a lot of them, and by doing so, it would have sent a strong signal that if you want to request refugee in Canada, do it properly. If you wanted to use a loophole, well, you're not going to be advantaged. Right now, it's harder to immigrate in Canada by the legal ways than coming through the woods. So it's not a good signal we're sending to people. Again, we're penalizing the people that abide by the law, and the people that actually don't really respect the law, we give them what they want. What I want to say on this is that by tweeting that everybody is going to be welcome in Canada, we encourage a mass movement to enter in Canada in an illegal manner, which is very, it's amazing that we don't put more emphasis than this, because our own prime minister invited people to violate our immigration law. And by doing so, whenever we create a mass movement like this, well, organized crime is always going to be around and sniffing the profits and everything. So there was a movement of criminal organization that infiltrate that movement and basically try to control people, and they use it to actually abuse of people. So it's not the immigrant that's a problem. It's the way we manage our immigration that was a problem. Now, there's a very easy principle when we intervene in any kind of emergency situation, is that we don't put the person that intervened into risk. We don't want to have two victims where we only had one in the beginning. That's basically what we did. By accepting people over our capacity and losing control of our immigration, what we did is that we depleted the resources of this country. It's not the sole reason why we're in this mess today. I mean, 10 years of Liberal really didn't help. But about specifically the immigration that happened here in Roxham Road, what happened is that we depleted our resources, and now it's very hard for us to not only answer the needs of the people that comes over here, but to answer the needs of our own population. So it's really like we put that first responder into a risky situation. Now we have two victims instead of one. So this could have been prevented just by following the laws we already had in place. That political interference didn't help anyone. Right now, another consequence that people don't see really, and it's because it created more delays, because we overuse our capacity. We went way over our capacity to deal with. It created immense delay. Pandemic didn't help, but it creates immense delay. So somebody that wants to immigrate, or I have a lot of farmers over here that hires like seasonal workers, right, from other countries. And somebody told me recently, I need to apply now for somebody I'm going to hire in 2026. Well, it used to take like 3 months. At the border, we used to issue a permit within 20 minutes. So how come these people that comes on a regular basis, it takes like 16 months and more to give them their permit? Well, it's because we really went all the way to go over our capacity, and now we're living the consequences of it.
Did you ever address, as a border service officer, the problem that we had with not only the taxi driver driving people directly to our border, but also the border officer from the U.S.?
Oh, that's been addressed many times. We've seen them on cameras. We see them sometimes. It's Border Patrol. They have two different units. They have like a CBP, which is the officer you're going to see in the booth when you cross the United States, and they have Border Patrol, the one that are patrolling between port of entries. What I would say is that we have many instances where we caught on camera a vehicle from Border Patrol dropping people on the highway. I've not witnessed myself, but I've been told they've seen it here too. Yes, we have addressed this to our management many times, but where that dossier is at right now, I wouldn't be able to say. But yes, this was noted and put forward by many officers, and even the union talked about it.
So we know that right now we are still in a crisis at the border, not just at the legal port of entry, because we know that there is a rising arrival of people from the U.S. But I spoke with people living at the border, and what they said is, yes, they see right now an increase of illegal crossing on their property. What you can tell about the current situation at the border?
When we changed the Safe Third Country Agreement, which was the reason why people were claiming here, is because they wanted to claim in Canada, and what I was talking about, the irregular immigration movement would have helped us to address this, so we would have been able to return them to the United States. But what happens is that when they modify it, they put a clause into it that within 14 days, we can still return them to the United States. So now the game for criminal organization is to offer all-included services. So people pay a fortune for it. And what they do is that they smuggle them in Canada and they hide them for 14 days. At least that's what their promises. But they're organized crime. They're not bound by any laws or regulation. So what they do sometimes, they drop them, and sometimes during snowstorm, this winter we had cases where people were hospitalized and lost fingers, toes. One of them, I think, lost almost all his fingers because of that. And they put them in very dangerous situation, at risk. And some of them end up in human trafficking. I mean, some women will be put to prostitution, kid will be abused, and even the people that are not going to be abused in such ways, sometimes it was costing to them so much money that for the rest of their life they're going to work for these enterprises. They're going to have to give part of their salaries, and right, so in order to reimburse the debt they contracted to these organizations. It's not all of them that operates this way, but we know that it happens, and we kind of encourage this when we decided that our law were not to be respected in the way they're supposed to. When we tweeted that it's okay to violate the Immigration Act, because every asylum at the border here start with a violation to the Immigration Act.
Just recently, the Liberals have announced that now they are increasing the manpower at the border. We saw just a couple of minutes ago the helicopter, the black car. We know also there is drone, camera, etc. But do you really believe that we have enough power and the resources at our border right now? And do you think the Conservative Party can do better?
Well, yes and no and yes. So basically what I would say is that CBSA often have been shorthanded staff-wise. But also, we have a very, very large management unit. So, meaning that a lot of resources have been put in the last years in growing our management team. But people on the ground, we don't have more people on the ground. We don't have less boots on the ground, or very few boots on the ground for the amount of manager that we have. And the problem is that what I find ironic is that with all these difficulties, every time like border officer union like rang the bell saying like we need more resource, needs to be addressed, nothing was done. And then there's an election coming. Suddenly conservative, what we said for years, and I remember I spoke about this with Mr. Poiliev 3 years ago. Not everything that he announced it, but part of it I spoke with him, and I can see that what I told him, he did listen, because his plan is to increase the number of border officers. He has a target of 2,000 additional border officers to enlarge our mandate. I remember telling him that we were confined in our sandbox, even though we had the power to step outside to intercept people in a reasonable amount of time. We had these powers, but our management was still refusing for us to apply this part of our mandate. And that's it. So yes, I think a conservative government will do a way better job, because it's focused on the expertise that comes from the floor, to listen and to see, okay, we have this need, how can we address it? I think a conservative government will definitely do a better job than what was done, because what was done was based on appearances, on ideology, as opposed to answering a need to the population. We pretend we're answering a need to the population, but the result just ain't there. And the Black Hawk helicopter, I find that very ironic, because this is something that I spoke with helicopter pilot. I was giving them a Nexus interview at some point, and he was sharing with me that they don't have that much hours of flight. They need to have more hours of flight, and we lose good pilot in our Canadian military. And Pierre, I never spoke of that with Pierre, but Pierre's said like a year ago, it's like we will use the Black Hawk helicopter we have, instead of buying like a new brand fleet of helicopter and spending, like we will use what we have. We're going to combine force, and we're going to assure a better surveillance of the border, and by enlarging our people. So the solution that was brought by the Conservative were concrete. We're focused on what can be achievable in a reasonable budget. And right now, well, we see that the Liberals are it's the election, so let's copy the good ideas the opponent had until we win those elections. After that, we don't know what's going to happen.
One of the big issues we have also, it's at the airport. We know that during the reform of the Third Safe Country Agreement, they also left the restriction on visas, bringing a lot of people to turn themselves afterwards as refugee. First of all, what do you plan to do with the Conservative Party to rectify this situation? And why there is nobody really doing something regarding that situation? Or if there is, we didn't heard about it.
That's a good question, and I won't pretend I know all the answer to what you just asked, but because there's multiple side to that question. But what I'm going to say is this. When we came back from the pandemic, we had a lot of backlogs. And obviously, some people try a creative approach, or they try to maybe try a new approach. And I know AI was introduced to process a case that could be easily processed. But what we realized is that a lot of visas were granted that traditional visa officer would not have granted. The purpose when we do risk assessment, because this is the purpose of a visa, is to make a risk assessment. Is this person's going to be really a visitor? Is he really a student? Or this is a school that basically pretend to be a school and it's not a school, and the person end up doing transportation or whatever. So the purpose of a visa officer is to make that risk assessment. And when we try to go fast with risk assessment, well, it happened exactly what happens now, is that their target was to get rid of the backlog, but nobody focused on, is the risk assessment done properly? Now, what happened is that we realized that risk assessment were not necessarily done properly. It's okay. What are they doing about it? I wouldn't pretend I know. But I know that it has been identified. Even our officer here, I know some of my colleagues were working on that specific issues, because we identify schools in different areas of Canada. I don't want to name them, but we identify like a certain organization that we know they offer like study visas, and they're not real school, or they school that pretend people are attending school, but they're not. So, but what they're doing concretely, nothing has been announced by this government. Nothing has been passed on also by our management. So I wouldn't be able to answer that question. But I know the situation has been flagged. Where they at with, I wouldn't be able to venture.
Would you say that the situation we are at right now, it's because of the Liberals?
I know of the interference of the Liberals in a way that often I remember I've voiced many concern about the way we do risk management in a program like Nexus or Trusted Traveler programs. And I remember that their main concern was the backlog. And I was saying, like, I do agree we need to do a good job and be productive and everything, but we cannot do it without doing a proper risk assessment, and we cannot neglect the risk assessment. And I was pointing out metrics that were not measured, that should have been measured, and still today I have no idea if they're measured now, because I've been off work for about 2 months. But the Liberals it's always like pushing an agenda and not necessarily measuring have we meet the target, as opposed to what Pierre Poilievre want. Just look at what he did. He announced a break on the gain capital tax, right? To give a break on the gain capital. And what he said is like, after a year, we're going to see if we have achieved our goal. And if we have, let's make it something permanent. So the purpose is that when we take an action, we need to measure, did the action answer the need? And this is not the approach I've witnessed in the last 10 years as a citizen. And in my capacity, I have not witnessed this kind of approach. There's many public servants that work very hard to meet the need of the population. But it's the political policies that are driven are not necessarily answering the need, and this is what's making. We cannot afford a fourth Liberal mandate. We just simply can't afford that.
Mm-hmm. And the last speech is for you. Why the people in the riding of Châteauguay, les Jardins-de-Napierville, should vote for you?
It's a good question. I invite anyone first to read the politics of the Conservative. I'm someone that don't blindly have an allegiance. I don't have an allegiance to the party. I started my candidate interview saying that the candidate represent the riding, not the party. The party is an alignment of force. It's a coalition of force, but The candidate represents the riding, the people who voted for him, the people who didn't vote for him. And the party kind of encouraged this because in NOR politics, it's written section 10 that the candidate needs to vote according to his riding. So this means that I'm a candidate that will represent what people want, not what I think is the right way or everything. Is that I will listen to what people need and I will work with them to build a solution so we can have in our riding the need. I'm someone also that strongly believe that power comes from the base, not from the top. So I will be there to defend what's necessary, what's important for the people of the riding. And I will definitely always dive 110% in everything that I do. So it's impossible for me to know everything. So we need to be able to rely and communicate and open a good communication with the different actors of the different industry and to answer the need of that industry so people can have a job, can have a home, can have, right? And I will definitely make sure that we don't punish people that are actually try to do the right thing and focus on the criminality. Like my friend over here that I met like a few days ago that told me about his home invasion. I mean, that person who invaded his home had done it on several occasions, had invaded several homes. We need to have someone that has a head on his shoulder and will focus on the people that are actually committing the crime, making sure to prevent the repetition of the infraction and understand these things to protect the population.
And especially because you have been working in your own riding.
I'm very sensitive. I'm very sensitive about and informed about the reality of the border. And obviously, I know it's a preoccupation. We have left, front, center preoccupation with what's happening in the United States. But I definitely understand. And obviously, I want to work hard for the riding, and I want to also implicate myself in the table on Ottawa to help to bring those immigration policy and regulation to make sure that they answer what people need. And with my background, it would be a tremendous help to defend the interests of these people. Like Pierre wants to eliminate the federal level for the work permit and study permit and give all the powers to Quebec. This is what decentralization look like, is that region know their needs and to give the power to the region to answer their needs. Well, if you vote for me, you're going to be supporting that kind of initiative that really put back the power into your hand and give your local authorities the power to actually answer these needs. And this is what I want to do. I want to make sure that people here, their needs are being answered, and they're being answered not just by beautiful speech, but by actually practical act and yeah.
We are at Ribbon News following the campaign really closely, and if you want to follow it too, you can do so at campaign2025.com. And on this website, not only you can get informed, but you can chip in to help our journalism.